You're welcome back. If you're just joining us tonight, we're talking about the school closures, and we are looking at how this insecurity is reversing education gains in Nigeria. So join us in this conversation. Remember, you can do that by sending us an SMS on 081-803-84663. Also, our phone lines are open. You can call on 0702-500-7749 and also on 0701-4242-420. Let's hear your thoughts. Now, this situation in Kebbi has stirred deep concern. Parents are frightened, teachers feel helpless, policymakers are scrambling for answers. And in the midst of all of this, one truth stands out. When a state closes all its schools, it is not just reacting, it is signaling that the threat is frighteningly real. Now, Nigeria has already the highest number of out-of-school children in the world. And school closures triggered by insecurity are making a bad situation worse. The question is no longer about the education access alone. It's about whether the Nigerian state can guarantee something as basic as safety of its children. We can no longer dismiss that these incidents are, isolated. They are part of a systemic failure that continues to expose young learners to unimaginable danger. When has it ever become a crime to want an education, to actually want to go to school, right? To be able to, compete with your mates on a global stage. When has that ever become a problem? Anyway, to help us understand the implications of Kebbi's decision and what it means for the future of education security in Nigeria, I have joining me now Dr. R. Nanri Ziga. I hope I got that right. But anyway, I'm going to have you pronounce it. And she's the Assistant Professor of Black African Studies in Education and a National Academy of Education Spencer Foundation Postdoctoral Fellow. Good evening, ma'am, and welcome to the show.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Yes, please do me a favor and pronounce your surname, please.
Nafziger.
Navziger, great. Thank you. All right, let's get into this conversation. So when a school is attacked, right, the first consequence is that parents lose trust. Now, what is the biggest policy failure right now that signals to a parent, that it is not safe to send your child back to school? What is that failure right now?
Well, as we can see, the schools have been closed, and so this is a policy failure. But really, Nigeria has signed on to Safe Schools Declaration, and so that is the specific policy that is currently failing right now. Nigeria has a policy called the National Policy on Safety, Security, and Violence-Free Schools. The Safe Schools Declaration was launched since 2015. So you will recall one of the most well-known abductions, of course, was the Chibok girls. There have been many abductions before and after. But in 2015, the government signed on to the Safe Schools Declaration, and they launched this plan on financing safe schools that was relaunched again that's supposed to be from 2023 to 2026. And this policy is supposed to create safety mechanisms and early warning mechanisms to protect schools. But this policy has largely failed because we're continuing to see abductions, we're continuing to see school closures. And of course, there's no one who will see that the children have been abducted from schools and they won't be afraid for their wards, right? A lot of the times these are boarding schools, so parents might be far away and they can't even get to their children very fast. But even at the level of schools in urban areas and in rural areas, parents are able to see that this is not an environment for their children to be in. And as you mentioned already, and also I'm very glad to hear that you were reading some of our auntie, Dr. Obi Ezekwesili, who already spoke truth earlier in your program about how, this has really become, it's a state of emergency. Our schools have been in crisis, and especially in the north. And we have to say that this is disproportionately affecting children in the north. And it's also disproportionately affecting a region of the country where the number of children already out of school is high. It's one of the highest in the world. And there are more children out of school in the north. And so we're seeing multiple failures. The specific one is the school declarations policy, but we have the enactment of the rights of the child. So of course, the rights of the child are being violated. One of their rights is the right to education. And Nigeria has signed on to Declaration of the Rights of the Child. Almost all the states have implemented the Child Rights Act. And so this is also a violation of children's rights to safety, children's rights to go to school. And so these are the multiple policy failures. Like UNICEF has written a monitoring report on this new mechanism. It's not that new, it's about 10 years old. But
Yeah.
they said on average, most states only meet 9 out of 21 of the minimum standards for safe schools.
Wow.
So schools don't have early warning systems. They don't have trained safety marshals. They don't have anyone to say, oh, there's an attack happening. They don't have any security infrastructure. So they're completely vulnerable to attacks. And they are soft targets. And this is what the terrorists know, that they are soft targets. And that is why they continue to attack them. These are vulnerable children. Oftentimes in a school, I think we've all been to schools, you will find a small number of adults with a mass amount of children, right?
Yeah.
And so they're attacking the most soft spots, the most vulnerable spot, and these schools are extremely vulnerable. There's nothing that any of them can do at this point because they're a microcosm of what's happening in the society. And so they are basically just there, like, like lambs to the slaughter. They're there like sitting ducks, right? The saying is sitting ducks ready to be taken off by these people. And you can see the large numbers that these operations are not small, right? We can see that hundreds of people are coming in to abduct hundreds of children. And the thing is, there's some that are on our radar. This has come to our radar, but over the last few years, over 11,000, you know, 11,500 schools have closed. There have been over 1,500 students that have been abducted in the last 10 years. And so we're seeing this continuity. There was
Right.
Katsina, there were so many. And so we continue to close our eyes to what is happening. Oftentimes, these are schools that are, the children are from different backgrounds. They're not attacking, the American or the British school in Lagos, or in Abuja. They find the targets that are soft, that are vulnerable, and these are the schools that are being attacked. So multiple policy failures, from Child Rights Act to their own policies on safety and security, to just a plethora of human rights acts that are being failed right now, and we're really failing these students.
Right. I mean, I'm glad you gave this opener, but now I think this question comes, I don't know, it's very personal to me. Billions have been committed through various initiatives and security funds. I mean, all of these policies and initiatives that you have mentioned, of course, there is money channeled into all of these things, right? So where is this money and why are state governors failing to translate these funds into visible, tangible, security infrastructure for schools?
Well, it's a problem of accountability and being able to track where the money is and where it's going. And unfortunately, there's not a comprehensive public record of disbursement and of utilization of these funds. And so there's a structural confusion between these agencies. There's the NSCDC, there's the police force on who is leading state security. And even though the initial fund was 30 million,
Yeah.
which is $30 million, and it was later expanded into a multi-donor trust fund. And over from 2023 to 2026, there was over 144 billion naira allocated, including about 33 million for 2023 alone. But the reports that we have show that only 15 billion of this money was released federally, leaving the rest to the states and the donors. So the fact is, we don't know. I've been working in education in Nigeria for, over 2 decades, and it's always been very hard to trace the money. Education is not a high profile affair where we're really tracking the dollars and cents. So a lot of things go on that we cannot know about. So it's one is we don't really know where the money is going. We don't know who has the money. We don't know where the money has been dispersed to. And we need to demand greater accountability for this, including donor funding that comes through the coffers of the states, because most donor funding does not come through NGOs as people might believe, but most donors actually work with the Nigerian state, work with state governments and the federal government. So I think that to ask the question is, yes, where is the money going? We need to demand accountability, and we
Right.
also need to demand where is the political will to really enact this. There's a general lack of accountability, a lack of political will, there's weak monitoring. The politicians, the political turnover, and the way that politics is in our country is that after a few years, the next election is starting to heat up, and everyone forgets what this government did and what that government did, and the passing of the buck from
Right.
one government to the other means that who falls to the wayside? It's our children, it's the general public, it's the poor, it's the marginalized. that fall in between the cracks of all these political maneuverings. So we really need to see, we need to hold state governors accountable. But one of the issues we have also is that security in general, and we know that the fight for state policing has gone on. And I personally, I can discuss it later. I don't think that policing is the only solution to the problem, but
Okay.
state policing has been something that has been, agitated for a long
Right.
time. Because when you have everything sitting at the federal government, the states will say, oh, we don't have the power to implement. They don't control the police force. They don't control the army. So oftentimes we see this also is something where the federal system and the federation that we have also allows these cracks to emerge and for the blame game to take place, where the state is blaming the federal is blaming the states, and then what happens is the people that are suffering.
Really, really sad. Really sad. Now, given the high rate of out of school children, unfortunately, we have the highest number. So, given this high rates, right, particularly girls in parts of the country, how significant is the damage to Nigeria's decade-long efforts to achieve universal basic education?
Yeah, so the damage is severe. We also have to remember that we are just five, even less than 5 years out of a global pandemic where we shut down all the schools in the country, right? And so this generation of children, not just in Nigeria, but globally, have already had the impact of school closures. Many of them dropped out of school, and many of them will never return to school, right? All those children that stopped going to school. So we have in Nigeria, or the number has stayed stagnant around 18, 20 million, but it's a huge number of children that are out of school. About 20 million children are out of school. So this impact now is going to roll back some of the efforts that we have made, even post-COVID, to increase enrollment numbers, to increase enrollment of out of school, especially girls and the girl child. There have been multiple campaigns, but NGOs from the international community have really focused on bringing girls back to school and making sure that they stay in school. But UNICEF shows that only 37% of these of schools have early warning systems, right? And so we continue to see these abductions, and there's so much long-term impact if these closures continue to exist. And I have to say that over the last 2 decades, northern schools have closed many times. In fact, I'm even today and yesterday I was doing more research, and it just really astounded me that we're actually really unaware of how many times these schools have been closed. So some of the long-term impacts, enrollment can drop. Right? When children drop out of school, even now, in Plateau State and other states, people are saying, oh, let me just send my child for an apprenticeship. Let me just send my child to the market. And once they go into those places, sometimes they never re-enroll. So we can see a drop of enrollment from up to 15 to 20%. This is what happens when school close. And northern states are at risk of losing up to 40% of their students. So you're talking about a region where so many children are out of school, right? Youth literacy could decline. We have lower levels of literacy than we were there, about 78% for males, 69% for females. The gender gap can increase. Girls will be sent to sell on the streets. They might be sent to marry. They might leave their homes. And once they enter that, or once they get pregnant, not being in school, they
That's
won't return to school. We have a loss of human capital. This can actually have an impact. We've seen that school closures and children out of school has an impact on GDP. And we saw this across the world, even during COVID, during school closures. And then so something called learning poverty also. So already learning poverty means that children are unable to read by the age of 10, right? This is called learning poverty. And it's already at about 70% in Nigeria, and this could rise to about 80%. So there's so many social risks, increased child labor, early marriage, and then the biggest one of all, which I would like to say, is that we're creating a circular problem, recruitment into armed groups. So we already know that some of the root causes of terrorism and what we're seeing in our country is from these high out of school rates. Children that are not going to school are more likely to be recruited into armed groups. They're more likely to join terrorist groups. They're less likely to have the kind of critical thinking skills to say, oh, I would rather go this way than this way. So you're actually reinforcing the problem. And this is something that they're expressly trying to do, right? They are trying to defeat the gains of schooling in Nigeria. They're trying to make sure that they continue to have a population that is uneducated and that can be easily recruited and manipulated. And so in a way, closing the schools is assisting them in their cause. And I'm not saying that we should not close schools, that children should be vulnerable and that they should be easy to
Yeah.
pick off. No, we can't say that. We've reached a point where there may be no other choice at the moment. But don't let us say that there's no other option so that next year or the next year again, it will be the same situation that this should be the option of last resort. The closure of schools should be the option of last resort. So yes, we may have reached the point where we are. It's unfortunate. We didn't have to reach this point, especially where we are, but we are here. And so what we can do now is say, okay, we are here, we have closed schools. How do we make sure this does not happen again?
Right.
Because we just keep entering into this cycle.
I mean, rather than running in cycles, we should find a long-lasting solution, right? Anyway, we're going to go on a very short break, and when we come back, we'll continue the conversation. Please stay with us. You're welcome back. We are still talking about school closures and, its impact, on the schools, on the education gains in Nigeria. And we still have our guest on standby. Ma'am, you're still here with us, right? Great. So let's continue the conversation, right? I mean, we talked about accountability, earlier. So we've seen, of course, security is often centralized, schools local, here and there. But what specific non-violent action can parents and even community leaders take today, to hold their state governors and even local government chairmen directly accountable for securing their schools? What can they do? Non-violent actions.
Yeah, so first of all, they need to demand transparency, public disclosure of safe school funds.
Okay.
We are able to make requests from the Freedom of Information Bill. We're able to request what has happened with these state funds. So they need to demand transparency. What has happened with these state funds? What are you doing with them? And for them to hold those government officials accountable. But I would say even before that, let me back up a little bit. I
Right.
think it's important for parents and communities to educate themselves on what is happening in the political system, the laws that are being passed, and to actually take interest and concern, to actually know what are the policies that are taking place. Sometimes I look at school policies and someone comes and tells me, oh, this policy was just passed. Meanwhile, the policy was passed 10 years ago. So it's very important that parents and communities stay on top of what the government is doing. And we need to really track what is happening in our state houses of assembly and the National Assembly so that when these laws are passed, we can even know in order to hold them accountable. But demanding transparency is one of them. The second thing is we need to form school safety committees.
Okay.
This is very important. Most schools have PTAs, although there have been some laws changing the power of PTAs. PTAs, or we had, SBMC, school-based management committees, and local authorities need to form a school safety committee in every school, right? To say, okay, what is the situation? I've also studied education, in the US, which has a whole nother issue in terms of school safety,
Yeah.
right? Where they have a different problem with people coming in and gunning down students,
Yeah.
which has become a massive issue, right?
Yeah.
But at the level of the school, each school has to have a school safety plan, right? So what happens? You know, do you have to have drills? What happens when something is coming, when we hear something, So these school safety committees have to form school safety plans, right? And everyone needs to go to their school principal or their school head or the head of their PTA and say, tomorrow they can go tomorrow morning and knock on the door and say, what is our school safety plan? Please. What are the emergency measures that we're taking? What are who is being called? What is the first level of response? What is the second level of response? What is the third level of response? And to make sure that these committees take responsibility, because unfortunately, We cannot wait for the government to do what it's supposed to do. We cannot wait. We can ask them, we can demand accountability, but we cannot wait. There's too much at risk. And what is at risk is the lives of our children, right? We have to leverage social accountability tools. We can call town meetings. Citizens, we have to know the power is with us. It is with us. So you call a town meeting in all of these states, okay, in Plateau, in Kebbi, in all of these places, the government has shut down schools. Everybody just go home and start managing their children and say, "Oh, I'll just, I'll do this and I'll get my uncle.
Adjusting.
Adjusting. Instead of saying, what is going on? We are calling you, everybody, we're calling you to come and give us account. We need to have a town hall today. By this weekend, there should be town halls held in every local government in every one of these states. We have 10 states that have either partially or completely closed their schools. You need to have town hall. If you have alumni association, we have all these old girls, old boys
Right.
association. It's their responsibility too. Call your school and say what we want to have a Zoom meeting. The old boys and the old girls association are demanding a meeting, and we want the local government chairman to be there. We have to put the pressure on radio programs, social media to pressurize these governments. We need to ensure community-based protection. These mechanisms for early warning, they're very important. I was just talking to people in one of the communities and I said, what, people are saying, what should we do? This is the number to call for the police. I said, no, don't look for the number to call for the police. Go and get the number of your neighbor. Get the number of all the people on your street. These are things, if we are able to do it at the community level, we will start to understand how we can do it for our schools. We need to have community-based protection. We all know, we've all been in situations where we've had to call the police or we've had to do something and they're looking for fuel, they're looking for this. We cannot rely on this. So there's two things, they have to happen simultaneously. One, we must not let the government off the hook. But two, we must also not wait for the government. We have to pursue these things simultaneously.
Right.
We need to advocate for legislative oversight. All the organizations going to Abuja, lobbying government, going to National Assembly, going to State House of Assembly, we need to go to those state assemblies and ask them, do an audit on this Safe Schools Fund. Do an audit. And also ask them, what exactly are you doing? Call your state of assembly. We have organizations, EIE, we have budgets, we have all these information. They've given you all the numbers of your state legislature. It's all publicly available. Pick up the phone and call them. If you don't want to pick up a phone and call them, go to their offices. You might not get in, but if enough people go, they will start paying attention to
That's
why are all
right.
these people going? What are they asking? Even if it's their PA that you're inundating with phone calls, it's something. So people have to take this matter seriously and not wait till it comes to your doorstep.
Yeah.
Not wait till it's the call. And we have to understand that, there's the saying is that there's these children, Nelson Mandela once said, these children, they belong to all of us,
That's right.
right? So don't wait until it's your child, God forbid, that you're getting the call from.
That's right.
Just imagine that this is your child that's inside a forest somewhere. The Chibok girls, 90 of them never came back, you know? And many of the parents died from heartbreak,
That's
you
right.
know? So we have to put ourselves in this position and say, no, it has happened to this parent, it means it has happened to me, and we need to take action.
Amazing, amazing. I think one of the highlights of what you've just said for me is instead of clamoring for the police's number, get the number of your neighbor. A lot of us don't even know the names of our neighbors, talk more of their contacts or what they do for a living. So I think this is such a solid point we should take to heart, and also stop staying to, expecting to be spoon-fed all the time and adjusting. We have this move on quickly syndrome in Nigeria, right? We just stop talking about it 2 days after and we move on to the next big gist, right? But, looking ahead, what indicators should we watch for to know whether Nigeria is making real progress in protecting its schools and, its children?
Well, we need to see a reduction in school attacks, right? That is the most obvious one. Over the last few days, there have been several, infographics that have come out from EIE, from other organizations that show the abductions over time. And so we need to see an actual reduction in these incidents, whether small or big. Some of the kidnappings are 3 students, some are 50, some are 60. It's the bigger ones that we notice, right? And this happens not just at the level of primary and secondary school, but also at the level of universities, technical institutions. And so we need to see a reduction in these indicators of actual abductions. Then we need to see an implementation of these minimum standards for safe schools. So we need to monitor that the schools are meeting these 21 standards, okay? So people can go online, the report is in PDF, it's publicly available, okay? The standards for safe schools, the school safe schools initiative, it's all publicly available, what they said that they would do. The money factor is not there, but the actual standards are there. So you can look it up, you can find, you can say, well, how many of these? And this has to be at the local level and the state level, okay? While we can leave it to the big monitoring NGOs and those who are doing the research work to look at it at the federal level, okay? We need to look at budget execution. What is happening with the funds? How much funds were allocated? How much funds were released? And how have those funds been implemented? And as I said, we have the Freedom of Information Act to back us up. We can request this. It is our right as citizens to request this information, and it has to be given to us. It has to be released to us, so we can do that. And then community engagement. We have to see these school safety committees being formed, and we have to see people engaging in them actively. So we want to ask the state to say, okay, we want a school safety committee in every school in our state in the next 2 years. And then we can then monitor that and see if these school safety committee meetings are being met. And I also spoke about school by school. What you can do is you can say, okay, an indicator you can see is you went to meet your principal. Don't go home and sleep. Ask them, has the school safety committee been formed? How many times is it meeting? What are the things that it has set up, right? So the community engagement metrics at the school level can also be there. And then we can monitor in retention, especially girls' enrollment. So girls' enrollment drops fastest when there's any crisis. The girls are the first people to leave school. So one of the indicators we can measure is the girls' enrollment, girls' retention in schools, and even overall enrollment and retention. So we see in high risk states, we can't always monitor things. We can't the monitoring and evaluation of a lot of these things is not well done. So, but some of the things, we might not be able to see, we might not be able to get all the information on school safety, but we can use these as proxies. So a proxy is just something we can use to measure something else. So we can use as a proxy, okay, enrollment is dropping. That might be an indicator the schools are not safe.
Right.
People are dropping out of school, that might be an indicator the schools are not safe. Parents are withdrawing their children from schools. These are indicators that we can use. And so UNICEF and these international organizations, they have a lot of tools that we can use and statistics we can use to measure and see what exactly is going on. Because if children are not safe in school, the parents feel safer for them to be in close proximity to them in the market, on the farm, at an apprentice shop where they can monitor them, then we have a problem, and we need to address it.
All right. Thank you so much. This is where we draw the curtain for tonight. It's been such a brilliant conversation. I wish we had more time to, explore, because one of the things I would have actually wanted us to talk about is the psychological toll these things take on the children, the victims, and their parents too, But then again, I mean, if you can do that in 1 minute, I'm really good.
Oh, I'm not a psychologist, but
I know.
but I am
I
a
know.
parent.
Yeah.
And I started organizing with Bring Back Our Girls, as far back as 2014. And I know that parents have suffered massive trauma from losing their children. And children also have long-term PTSD, they will never forget an experience of a kidnapping. It has a permanent imprint on their brain, and they will continue to be fearful. They'll have these different symptoms of PTSD, and some of them may never fully recover without adequate care. So we know that trauma is something that's very long term. And then what what happens to them? What happens to their families, even after they're brought back? The damage is sometimes something that's very permanent.
And I mean, we don't even have a government who are concerned with this aftermath, situation. You just want to tell us, for instance, these people they brought back in Kebbi State. You're just telling us, oh, you brought them back, but the PTSD, you can be asleep and you're jerking, and you're reliving the moment, and that can ruin someone's life forever.
For
Anyway,
sure.
thank you so much for
Absolutely.
your time, Miss Navziger.
Thank you so
I
much
am
for
so
having me,
grateful for
Vivian.
having you here. All right, do have a wonderful, wonderful evening. All right, you see, this conversation is one, like I said, I really wished I had more time to talk about, right? Nigeria must not accept these school closures as normal. Yes, you can say you're looking out for the children is necessary to shut down, but can we treat what the problem is from the grassroots so that we would not have to come up to this consequence, of school closure? The crisis unfolding is not just about insecurity. It's about the future of a generation. And if education collapses, the nation collapses with it. And we can't afford that right now as a nation. And today's conversation is a call to reclaim classrooms, protect the rights of children, and even ensure that no Nigerian child has to choose between safety and going to school ever again. Ever again, especially children in the north. Anyway, before we go, remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Official Upgrade TV. Drop a comment, like, share, follow all our social media platforms. And if you missed our quote earlier, here it is. It says, education must be safe, schools must be protected, children must never be targeted. And this was said by Ban Ki-moon. My name is Chioma Kalu, and this has been Waste Prime Time. Have a good night, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.